But my first question is, what have you sacrificed and gained by joining the nonprofit sector? And that's for anyone who wishes to answer.
Can I take a stab at that?
Yes, you can.
I'm not sure if it's a sacrifice, but I think it's just a reassessment of time, right? You know, we don't create widgets in our jobs. We don't, you know, at least the work that I do, we are not feeding 100 people or, you know, making sure there are 100 beds or creating vaccines. And, you know, that is not the work that we do. So there's a amorphous quality to our work, which sometimes might be frustrating. But you've got to keep faith that at the end of the day, you are all working together, especially in moments like this, like tonight, where we meet and everyone is interested in a larger vision of society. We're all interested in equity or social justice or women's leadership. So that pulls you together. But on moments of despair, you wonder why you're doing what you're doing, where measurement and impact just seems so difficult to achieve.
Anyone else?
Vacation time. I have sacrificed it.
I will tell you.
You have to be careful because you can get really, if you have any workaholism in you at all, this will just
Suck you in.
And take it from you, and you will give it openly, willingly, and with love. And that, I am a big believer in, please, you know, to role model it, you have to be the one to take care of yourself. And I'm not so good at it. And you've got to do that. You can't lead others by not doing it yourself. So I would tell you in the not-for-profit sector, you have to make that balance happen because what you're doing, you really do love doing. So you've got to keep balance.
So, and I hear you on that, but people do like and work too hard in the for-profit sector.
Oh, yes,
as
oh,
well.
absolutely.
So,
Yeah, it's a different bonus structure.
Different
bonus.
But they actually
There
do
you
get
go,
quite caught up in
absolutely.
what they're doing and
Absolutely.
working on
Sure.
and all of that. On a very personal note, since this change was quite recent for me, I would say that one of the things that I certainly have sacrificed is comfort. And by that I mean in the for-profit world and having been in the same firm for over 20 years, I knew what I was doing and I knew how to do it and I knew what was expected of me and what needed to be done to deliver, or what the deliverables were, and I knew what the deliverables were. To have moved to the nonprofit sector, this is all new to me in a lot of ways, and it's not just that it's a different job, it is a completely different way of looking at the world and of people within an organization relating to each other, and frankly of organizations relating to each other. So what I've gained in some ways is it's fascinating and it's fun and it's interesting, and so I mean it's just really nice to do something a little bit different and to be thinking about things in a different way. So a little bit on the taking the risks is worth it at times, and there's always a sense of satisfaction of a job well done in any sector, and there's always going to be things that you think are important, and then when they happen, when you do them well, when things go well, you're going to feel really good about it. But in my experience over the last 4 months, in the job I have now, I have the same thing, but then I get to add a little bit more on top of it and wow, isn't this neat? I mean, this actually is moving the needle somewhere, and so it's still the fun of something working out well and achieving, but then there's also on top of it the wonderful feeling that what you've done and what the organization has achieved might actually make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
So-
Elizabeth's in the club. Yeah, we got you.
Well, I have a quick question for the audience. How many of you are in the private sector thinking about going into the nonprofit sector? Well, this question might be relevant to some of you, and this is for the panel. What strategies have you implemented in transitioning between sectors, and also areas within the nonprofit sector? Anyone?
Even though I've worked in the not-for-profit, as the leader of my organization, 40% of the people that work at Renew International have come from the corporate sector. And just to see some of the transition and to try to make that a little easier for people, I see a big difference, now you could speak to it more, especially when you're in a smaller organization, is that when you work in the corporate world and you're a manager, you have other people doing the work. When you come to the nonprofit, not only do you supervise them, but you do the work, and you make your own copies, and you do all those kinds of things. So that's part of it. Also, the structure, the culture is so different in the not-for-profit. So helping people to get used to that, the way we relate to each other. People who've worked in the not-for-profit a long time, now you put the whole religious thing on it. Things like compensation, we don't like to talk about the money. People come in the corporate world and their merit pay is very important. Some of the metrics are much clearer. So then, it's a more kind of everybody's egalitarian kind of culture. So I think that I've seen people really struggle to make that cultural shift. So to be aware of that, because there's so many some of our most talented folks have come from the corporate, but to be able to help to incorporate that and to address that there is certainly a big cultural difference.
Yeah, I was going to say, as a point of note, the nonprofit sector is very big, right? The nonprofit sector includes small grassroots organizations. It also includes Harvard University. So, and there are many different experiences and things that you can have within it. I mean, when I was a major gift officer at a college, I had a lot of comfort and I had a lot of resources and I had lots of people to do all of those things, even though it was a nonprofit. Because a different kind of organization with a different kind of mission. I think the biggest thing in terms of transitioning, whether it's within a sector or from sectors, is your network. And understanding the value of a network, particularly for women, and understanding how it is so critical and important that your network is broad. Women tend to have deep networks because we value relationships and the quality of relationships, and we tend to think it's a bit icky to have relationships that are just about the exchange of resources between two people. Somehow we feel like that's dirty. But in fact, that's exactly what you need, is a lot of people who know who you are, who you're visible enough to, that they will extend their network on your behalf in order for you to make any, I think, really successful transition.
And this would be my my plug on the transition. I do think that there are differences in the way people tend to, and you're absolutely right, both sectors are quite broad with lots of differences, but the way people tend to relate within not-for-profits, within the corporate sector. And it is not a terrible thing, I firmly believe, for not-for-profits to every once in a while have sprinkled in among them people who have come out of a more corporate environment. Because there are certain traits that we have learned, certain levels of efficiency and ways of relating that perhaps need some tempering and are good to be tempered in that environment, but also I think bring sometimes, depending on the organization, some necessary attitudes and ways of relating and thinking about the world to not-for-profit. So I actually think that the movement between the sectors is actually very good for both sectors and for the people doing the moving, because these are all pieces of kind of a whole person and a whole functioning organization with different emphasis on different pieces at different times. And society, yeah, exactly.
So I've been in nonprofit all my life, but one thing that I have seen just as I've transited between jobs is just, when I first started, right after graduate school, it was easy enough to simply shut my door, do the research, write my reports, and then emerge, a week or so later with this product, right? I couldn't imagine doing that anymore, right? So the idea is that all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but I am in a much more public capacity right now. I have to constantly navigate, negotiate multiple relationships on a day-to-day basis. I have to make sure that not just the person that I report to, but the entire structure that lies behind that is constantly kept abreast of everything that is going on. So there's a lot of other sets of negotiation and navigating that has to happen. And then, of course, then there is the outside world. I remember a previous supervisor that I had in one of my jobs. It was a wonderful job, and I was naive, obviously. I sat in my office and did my work, handed in the report, and went home. And after about a year and a half, she said something to me that I will never forget. She said, Shyama, you do good work. It's decent work. You think well. You don't strut your stuff. And that was the words that she used. You don't strut your stuff. And I had no idea what that meant. I just had was it my clothes, was it just how I looked? I had no idea. And there was just, it was a very deep sentence. It was full of issues that related to gender, certainly age, but also how one needs to be a grown-up in the workplace, right? So you couldn't just hide behind your work. You've got to make sure that the people who need to see it, and you've got to make sure that you're confident enough and assertive enough to talk about what you need in your workplace to make your own work better and more productive. So that is the sort of shifts and transitions that I've had to make. And the other part is that I think much more now as a grown-up, I meet people from the corporate world that I have to engage with and interact with. So my short forms of the nonprofit speak that I have, my academic training, none of that works, frankly. It's actually old and obsolete. People don't talk like that. So I've got to learn a whole new vocabulary dealing with lay people. And by lay people, I mean corporate people. So, which means you've got to really be speaking very clearly in sentences that make sense, that have goals, that have impact, that have logic models. You've got to sell your product because we are in the ideas business. And as a producer, you're only good as what you deliver makes sense. And so the whole world of consumers out there, it's a very competitive market and they can go someplace else. So you've got to make sure your product sells. And you do that by speaking the right speak.
Well, thank you.